and welcome to Fiction Fans, a podcast where we read books and other words too. I'm Lily.
And I'm Sarah.
And we are going to be discussing The Two Towers by J.R.R. Tolkien. But first, what's something great that happened recently?
Something great that happened recently is I was scheduled to have a dentist appointment on Saturday, and they moved it up to yesterday, which was lovely because I have people coming over on Saturday, and I was kind of feeling bummed that I was going to have to leave in the middle of that to go get my teeth looked at.
There is almost no bigger bummer than a dentist appointment.
Yeah. So this was much more convenient, and I was not expecting it. It was a nice surprise.
Well, wonderful. So you say you have it tomorrow, or you had it yesterday?
No, I had it yesterday.
It
was supposed to be 2 days from now.
But it has at this point already happened.
Yes.
So not only do you not have to go to a dentist appointment while you have friends over, but also it's already taken care of. So you don't have to think about the dentist for at least 3 months.
Well, actually, I do have to go back in 3 weeks. Well, 4 weeks because of
your teeth.
Because of my teeth. Yeah. I need a crown, and my old dentist, whom I like very much, he retired, and I kind of think that he stopped giving a fuck in his last year. And so he told me, nah, you don't need a crown. It's fine. And I went to the dentist and they said, yeah, you need a crown.
That's horrifying.
A little bit. But apparently they manufacture the crowns in their own office. So you can go and get it put on, and you don't have to get a temporary crown and then wait 3 weeks and come back.
So why are you waiting 3 weeks and then going back? Oh, because they just decided you needed it.
Yes.
Gotcha. Well, Godspeed. I annoy my dentist because they made the mistake of telling me how great my teeth were before asking me how often I brush them. And it kind of takes the wind out of their sails.
Yeah, my teeth used to be like that, and then I got older. It's astonishing that your body stops working as well as you age.
I know. I'm 29. It's my last year of immortality.
Enjoy it while it lasts. So if your birthday coming up soon and your rapidly dwindling immortality is not your good thing, what is your good thing?
My cat has diarrhea medication.
This is very exciting.
Do I have to specify anti-diarrhea? That's implied, right?
I'm pretty sure that no one expects you to have diarrhea. No one expects you to have medication that gives your cat diarrhea on purpose.
I mean, there are stool looseners, but that's what you would call that.
Yes.
Wow, this is a good conversation to get started on.
It's going to be one of those episodes.
But if you had bathed diarrhea off of your cat as often as I have in the last week, you would be as desensitized as I. And let me tell you, that was not fun for anybody.
But now you have anti-diarrhea medication, and you will no longer, presumably, be put in a situation where you need to wash your cat's diarrhea off of him.
I'm looking forward to that.
Understandable.
The poor thing. He was honestly such a trooper, though. He obviously wasn't happy having a shower, but he just squirmed while I held him. He didn't really try to get away or make sad sounds or anything.
Oh, poor thing.
And he would run and find us immediately. He knew he did not want to be covered in poop.
It's probably not much more pleasant for him than it is for you.
No, it's probably much worse. Anyway, and then he's a very fluffy cat, and so being all wet and skinny afterwards was very funny. He's a good boy and doesn't deserve that.
The one thing, I have to give you a little bit of shit for this, pardon the pun. The one thing is, in all of the time that you have been bathing him, you have not sent me any pictures of him post-bath.
Oh,
wet and skinny.
Well, usually that's because post-bath, wet and skinny, I am also trying to recover from the showering process. I mean, Daniel and I, it's definitely a two-person job. I do have one picture. I will send it. Maybe I'll post it in Pet Pictures.
You should post it on our Discord.
Yeah, on our Discord. Hey, that's a plug. Anyway, hopefully that will be over soon. I'm looking forward to that.
Fingers crossed.
Well, On a less shitty subject, what are we drinking tonight?
I'm drinking mead because I felt it was book appropriate, even though I am going to be drinking a lot of mead tomorrow. And I didn't necessarily want to have too much similarity between my drinking tonight and my drinking tomorrow. But
Oh, I thought you meant that made it not book appropriate. And I was like, what? What?
no. It remains book appropriate. That's why I'm reading it. That's why I'm drinking it.
All right.
What are you drinking?
Reading mead and drinking books.
Yep. That's what we do.
Yes. That should be the new tagline. Wait, actually.
We read mead and drink book too.
Well, tonight I am drinking Basil Hayden's bourbon on the rocks, mostly for the rocks because it is 94 degrees, which is warmer than I would like.
Yep. That's hot and unpleasant.
It's less unpleasant in front of a fan, but I thought I would spare everybody that auditory situation.
I can't speak for listeners, but I appreciate that.
And you're the one who actually matters.
Aw.
No. So, have you read anything lately other than the book we are about to discuss?
The answer was going to be no, except that we got a request from Carolyn over at Angry Robot, and she wanted to know if we would be able to blurb 13 Ways to Kill Lulabelle Rock by Maud Wolf, which is a book that I've been excited about. We're going to be covering it on the podcast in January, which I believe is when it releases. And I wasn't going to read it until we covered it on the podcast. But she asked if we could blurb it. So obviously, yes, because it's very gratifying to have been asked.
Extremely flattering, yes.
Yes, very flattering, but also genuinely a book that I was looking forward to reading. So I've been reading that.
I'm sure I will have been reading that soon, but tenses have not started it yet. Shocker.
Quelle surprise.
I know. Keeping you on your toes.
Yep.
No, I have been reading employee handbook templates.
That's maybe not quite as interesting as what I'm reading. Just putting it out there.
No. Trying to come up with a professional way of phrasing, you can wear literally anything unless a client can see you. Oh, I was asked if someone was allowed to wear tank tops to the office, and I was like, dude, I cannot stress how much we do not care what you wear.
I mean, it's a very sweet question.
Hey, no, I mean, people who work in real offices, that's probably a concern. But
I read lots of Ask a Manager, and yes, it is a concern for people who work in real offices.
But I was like, fuck no. I think actually my exact phrasing was, oh dear, this is why I should not be anyone's boss. Well, if we have a client call, you just got to be professional from the tits up. So she brought in a flannel for the back of her chair, and then it's her emergency professional shirt. And I was like, that's perfect.
That works.
Yep. Anyway, I'm the one writing the HR handbook, so that's good. I'm sure that won't be a problem for anybody.
I'm sure it'll be just fine.
I will use different phrasing in that, but that's the struggle. We're not here to talk about employee handbooks. We are here to talk about The Two Towers, which, can I just use that as our employee handbook? Wait, actually.
I'm not sure that it goes into things like office wear.
I mean, yeah, I can't string that joke out any longer. I wish I could.
I was trying to think of things that it would cover, like interpersonal conflict, but not all of that is probably a great model for how you want it to go in the office.
As entertaining as that would be, you're probably right. Well, technically, we have just read books 3 and 4 of The Lord of the Rings.
It's true.
Because that's how they're split up inside the text. And so this being quote unquote book number 2 is kind of completely arbitrary and pointless and doesn't really follow anything. And I declare that this is just one book.
You mean The Lord of the Rings is one book or The Two Towers is one book?
I don't think anyone's arguing that The Two Towers is actually 2 books.
No, but I would love to see someone try.
It would be easy. They're titled books 3 and books 4.
It's true. It would be easy. And I don't know. I think it's really interesting the way that Tolkien, even if we're saying that they're arbitrary splits, sure, whatever, but
I would say that the splits between Fellowship, Two Towers, and Return of the King are arbitrary.
Yes.
But he has his 6 internal parts, right? Some number.
Yeah.
And those, I imagine he did thoughtfully and on purpose.
Yeah, I think I recall reading in one of his letters or something how carefully he was tracking the passage of time in The Lord of the Rings, but I don't actually have a quote for that, so I can't back that up with any facts. But no, what I was talking about was I think it's really interesting that there is a complete split of POV characters in the books, and that does really make it feel like two separate stories that just so happen to be taking place in the same chronological time frame.
Yeah, it's definitely I would say relic. I don't know. I don't think most stories would separate out their points of view like this. I think they would alternate more often.
Yeah, I mean, I think that alternating more often makes more sense because it's a little less confusing. In my opinion, it's a little less confusing for the reader. And if you don't like one POV character, you know that you're going to have another POV change soon enough. Whereas if you don't like one or the other, you're kind of stuck for however many pages.
Who doesn't like one of the points of view? Fight me.
Not me. I'm just saying that
No,
it's,
I get it. In
yeah,
practice, yes.
yeah.
Although now that I'm saying that, I am remembering that one of the Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire books, or there's a point at which there are two books that cover the same period of time, and the points of view within the books alternate, but it's like one book is one chunk of points of view, and then the other book is a separate chunks of points of view.
Yeah, I think actually that there's a Wheel of Time book or a couple of Wheel of Time books that do the same thing. But I don't know.
Really, I think that just means that they have too many points of view and it got unwieldy.
I don't know if I entirely agree with you there, but that's a different argument that we probably shouldn't have in this episode because it will be long and derailing. But I do think that it's a little less jarring when you actually do have two separate physical books because you're expecting it more. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I feel like the first couple times I read this, granted, I was fairly young. I did not understand that we had jumped back in time.
Yeah.
And that was definitely a situation. But I was also a kid, so I think I'm allowed to be confused.
Definitely, but I do think that that is one of the dangers of doing something like this is that it does make it harder or it can make it harder for the reader to follow along with events.
Yeah. I remember, God, I've watched the specials on the DVDs of the Peter Jackson movies so many times. One of the writers, Fran or Philippa, was talking about how they were trying to find like time markers in the two different narratives so that they could kind of try to match it up, and how that was a thing that they did. That's it. That's all.
Yeah.
I just I have seen those so many times. I cannot talk about this and not bring up and this one special on the DVD.
Well, no, but that's a convenient segue into a completely different topic, which is comparisons to the movies, which I think we said in the last book that we didn't want to do too many of because we're trying to focus on actually like reading the books and discussing the books and not just discussing how the books compare and contrast to the adaptations. But I was immediately struck.
But also, here's
But
how they
also-
compare and contrast to the adaptations.
Here's how they compare and contrast. Yes. I was immediately struck on page 4 when Boromir is dying.
Page 4. He opens this book on a main character death.
Yeah.
Eat your heart out, Martin.
And Boromir has a much more just like matter of fact statement about his dying. Like in the movies, he's got this whole stirring speech, like, I would have followed you, my comrade, my king, my friend, whatever the line is. And it really like tugs on your heartstrings. And in this, it's much less dramatic. And it kind of, I don't know, it made me think about what we expect from scenes with major character death in fiction these days. Because I think that we do expect a little more drama when someone important to the story or who has been up until this point important to the story dies a traumatic death via orc arrows.
I have two very different theories One is much more charitable to Tolkien than the other. We'll start with the nice one. He saw fire, like not fire, but like live fire battle in, I don't remember which war he was actually like in. I think it was one.
The Great War, I believe. Yes. First World War.
And so I feel like there's something to, he's probably actually witnessed people die, and they did not have a lot of time or presence of mind for a beautiful speech. So something about that feels bleakly realistic.
Yes. I know what your other theory is, and I'm going to go on record beforehand and say that I think that your first theory is more likely to be accurate. But I'll let you say your second theory.
My second theory is born from the fact that as much as I love Tolkien, he kind of loves the monarchy a little too much. Not a specific monarchy, but the idea that the bloodline of kings is very important. And he does hold kings to like their end of the bargain. I'll give him that. But also, you know, Aragorn has a lot of dramatic speeches, even in the books.
Like I said, I don't necessarily agree that that's the reason why he doesn't give Boromir his rousing death speech.
Maybe not consciously, but like Boromir's the son of the steward, the usurpers.
But he talks a lot about the nobility of Boromir and of Faramir, and not Denethor. We don't see Denethor in the Two Towers.
So we may not speak of him.
So he doesn't exist yet. Actually, I think we've heard mention of him. So he does exist, but he's not a character yet.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't get an impression that, or at least I don't get the impression that Tolkien thinks that Boromir and Faramir are, you know, of the lines of the usurper or anything like that. Like, that's not how he treats those characters. So I don't think that that's what his reasoning was when he made Boromir's death short and straightforward.
I don't think that was like, I was being glib when I was like, he doesn't deserve a speech because he's not a king.
Yeah, but you said it, so I have to react to it.
Yeah, I know. You're right. You're right. There might have been something in his subconscious, but you're right. I mean, especially Faramir is treated very well as a character.
Yeah, like they're constantly talked about in terms of their nobility and how like gracious and strong and stewardly they are. So they get a lot of that kind of description playing them up.
Yeah. No, I think you're right in that I was right earlier. I do think it's just more like of a realistic, and that's kind of very dark. But there are some dark moments in these books, considering Boromir died on page 4.
Better than in the first book, I guess. He makes it to book 2, technically.
He does make it to book 2. I understand why the movies put that at the end of book 1. It's a much better climax than an opener.
It is. I mean, I think that the movies made a lot of smart decisions about pacing, and that was one of them. The other thing that I think works a lot, I don't want to say a lot better, but that I think makes for a slightly more compelling storyline is, and okay, I guess we're just going to go full spoiler, no spoiler break here because...
Well, I guess we already spoiled page 4, but also, yeah, no spoilers. I don't think we did spoilers for Fellowship, did we?
I don't think we did either.
Yeah, no. Hey, guys.
Yeah.
Hey, guys. We all know you already know the story. And if you don't, spoiling it does not actually ruin it. We can't actually spoil this book. I said it.
It's true.
Even if you know what happens, reading the book is worth it. Watching the movies and then reading the book is worth it, whatever order you do it in.
It's true.
If it takes a fun conversation to get you to be interested in reading it, it's worth it. Okay, I'll stop interrupting you.
No, but everything you said is correct. So you're forgiven for interrupting me.
Thanks.
But one of the things that I found interesting, again, to compare to the movies was the motivation that they ascribe to Gollum's decision to lead Sam and Frodo to Shelob's lair. Because in the movies, it's much more of a reaction to Gollum feeling betrayed by Frodo for what happens in Ithilien and Faramir and his men, like getting him from the pool and capturing him. And in the books, it's a much less sympathetic reason way before they are in Ithilien, he decides that he's going to lead them to Shelob because, if they're going to be putting the precious in harm's way in this way by going into Mordor, he might as well have the precious. So he's just gonna, do it. And it makes you feel like the books definitely do try to position Gollum as sympathetic, I think, but not nearly as much as the movies do.
I think there's a different function in the books in that Gollum is sympathetic because he is a victim of the One Ring, but the One Ring corrupts absolutely.
Yeah.
He's a victim. He would never consider betraying the ring. Whereas in the movies, there's almost like a will he, won't he. Like maybe his love for Frodo will overcome, the corruption of the ring.
Yeah, no, I think you're right about them serving different purposes. And I think that this is one of those things where what works in the book doesn't necessarily translate well to the screen. And so they changed it. But it was just, again, something interesting that stood out to me as I was rereading these books.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I do think it is more compelling to have evil characters or corrupted characters walk that line.
Especially when you only have 3 hours to create drama.
Yeah. And where I feel like in the books, Tolkien had more of an agenda to talk about the nature of evil and, not that Gollum was a bad person for having this happen to him, but that he did not have a choice. I think it was more poignant that he did not have a choice, making a different point, I guess. Well, a point that I would like to make. Why everybody be killing spiders? What did a spider ever do to you? Actually think about it for a second.
Maybe everyone has been personally victimized by spiders.
Find that hard to believe. I mean, look, they scare the pants off of me. If I find a spider where I was not expecting a spider, I scream, I flail, I'm human. But my reaction is not then to kill it or be afraid of it. That's just, you have your gut reaction and then you deal with the spider. I'm being a little silly. I get they're so different from people in every way. Like there's nothing familiar in their form, so I understand why they're scary. But like spiders don't do anything bad. They might bite you, but you have to fuck them up real bad for them to bite you.
Side note, completely unrelated. Well, only very tangentially related.
Are you going to say that we live on the west coast of the United States, so there are no bad spiders here?
No, but that is a good point.
That's pretty related.
Yeah, that is quite related. No, I was going to make a comment that I believe that Adrian Tchaikovsky has a sci-fi book where all of the main characters are alien spiders or something. And it sounds from your statement that like that is a book we should look into to cover on the podcast.
Tchaikovsky has been on my list just because I've heard about him from so many people. And that does sound like it aligns with my interests or my propaganda of spider love.
Spider propaganda.
Pro-spider propaganda. Look, they eat mosquitoes, okay? I don't know how you can complain about that.
It's true.
That being said, we do have bamboo sticks at all of our house doors so that you can walk around with them waving in front of you so that you don't accidentally walk through a spider web. I do not want a spider on my person.
You just don't think they deserve quite as bad a rap as they get.
Oh, yep. That's all. Thank you for letting me get on that soapbox for a minute.
You're welcome. I don't necessarily mind the anti-spider bias in these books.
I don't mind it. It's just that I had to say something.
I was going to say, I don't actually mind the anti-spider bias in these books, but something I do think is worth pointing out is the fact that all of the bad guys in this book are described as swarthy or dark-skinned, and that's not a great look for Tolkien.
Ooh, yeah. No, that's a real point. You're correct.
Yes, that is a real point. Talking about things that I think that this book gets wrong.
Yeah. I feel like he was trying to create an other, but I mean, immediately othering all people of color is not good, obviously.
Yeah, like, sure, but that's not the way to go about creating an other, my dude.
Yeah. And, well, really the only thing that can be said in his defense is that they are victims, like all of the other followers of Sauron.
The one thing that I think that the Rings of Power gets very right is their diverse casting. I will give them kudos for that.
Yes. I would also like to point out Faramir's line about how the person he killed thought he was just as right as they did.
Oh, yes. I mean, I think that Tolkien is trying to show, or I think he does attempt to show some nuance in the antagonists of the book, or the foot soldiers of, Sauron, because I don't think Sauron has a lot of nuance specifically in this book, although he wasn't always evil, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they don't get enough screen time to actually give it any impact.
I agree. I think Tolkien does a good job of, not subtly, but with a very soft touch, trying to get into his audience's head that, like, hey, they think they're good guys too. Fuck off. Which is much more of a war statement, I think, than him dealing with, we're just going to create a bunch of others to fight, and they're all going to be people of color, and that makes them different and easy to recognize. That's no good. His statements on war, good. His handling of race, not good.
Yes.
And they get mixed up a little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, because there's not a lot of page time dedicated to making sure you understand they're separate. So I can see why they get conflated.
Are the hill folk also described as swarthy, etc.?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Bummer.
Yeah, like literally all of the villains or all of the people who fight on Sauron's side.
Except for Wormtongue.
Except for Wormtongue.
And Saruman. They're white.
It's true. But they also get a lot more page time.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. No, I am fully playing devil's advocate. I'm not actually trying to excuse Tolkien.
Yeah, I know.
He also, okay, we spent a lot of time in our Fellowship of the Ring episode and the Hobbit episode complaining about his shafting of the dwarves. But really, if we want to talk about a race of people who get shafted, is the orcs.
That's true. But I do think that is at least partially, I mean, I'm not going to argue that they don't get shafted in the books too, but I think that that's at least partially because of the films, going back to our film comparison, because in the films, they are a lot more other than they are in the books. Like, we see them a couple of times in the Two Towers, not so much in Fellowship, not at all in Fellowship, but in the Two Towers, we see them a couple of times from more their own point of view, where they're having conversations with each other, talking like normal people to each other, complaining about work, calling themselves lad, basically acting as like the office grunts and being a lot more relatable. And we don't see any of that in the movies. And I think when people think of Tolkien's orcs, they think of the movies orcs.
I agree. I think it happened before the movies, though. If we look at Dungeons and Dragons as also taking a lot of cues from Tolkien fantasy, orcs are monsters. You can play as a half-orc. You cannot play as an orc. And there have actually been comments about how horrifying that is. You're basically saying you're a child of sexual assault. There's not really a way around that in the way orcs have been written in D&D. So problematic half-orcs aside, it got picked up and run away with before the movies, I guess I want to say.
Yeah, like I agree that it's not just the movies, but I think that aspect is a lot more exaggerated. The non-human aspect, the
monstrousness
of the orcs is a lot more exaggerated in material that is referencing Tolkien than it is in the orcs that we see in the Two Towers, at least.
I agree. Even if you just look at their speech.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, they're talking, like they are having conversations.
Yeah, like they call, like I said, they call each other lad. They're basically very British.
And in the movies, they talk in the movies, but it's very truncated.
And it's in the movies, it's all violent, right? Like in the books,
they're not complaining about having a shit job.
Yeah. In the books, it's much more mundane.
Yeah.
Like, yes, there are the orcs. Like there's the meats back on the menu boys orc who is basically in the books too. But you see a lot more variety in their character than you do that kind of one note monstrous, violent, savage orc.
And you get, I wouldn't say orc culture at all, But you get the implication of culture in that there are multiple groups of orcs, distinct groups of orcs who clash.
Yes.
And technically you get that in the movies too, but there it's more just like they're fighty angry boys. So of course they're fighting. And much less like these are two distinct groups who are being forced to work together and they don't like it.
Yeah.
I have alluded to before, and I'm going to do it again. I have this memory of reading a quote at one point of Tolkien saying that he wished he had handled orcs better in The Lord of the Rings. And I could not find that quote, but I did find a couple talking about how orcs are victims of Morgoth, like they're not irredeemable. I found one of them was about how in one of his letters he wrote that orcs truly believed that elves would eat them alive. So of course they fought. Like orcs see elves the way elves see orcs.
I thought that was in one of his essays.
Was it the essay?
I thought you said that was the essay, yeah.
Hold on.
Because in letter 153, he's also talking about orcs, but he is talking about their genesis and not their views on the opposition.
I've pulled it back up. You're correct. In the letter, he's talking about, I know. In the letter, he's talking about how Morgoth did not create orcs, he corrupted them, and is very, I mean, Tolkien's super Christian, right? And it comes out in times when he was like, well, they're part of the world, and God made the world, and therefore they have to be good somewhere.
To be fair, this letter was also, and he didn't send this letter. He might have sent something similar that we don't have, or I don't have access to. But the note on this letter says that it was unsent because he felt that he was making it too much about himself. But the letter was in response to a pastor or someone who was similarly very religious and who was asking questions from that point of view. So his references to religion are not without context in this particular case. But yes, he was very religious in general.
Yeah, I mean, yes. He's allowed to be religious. I'm allowed to be uncomfortable when he brings it up. I feel like for the most part, he's chill about it. And if he's using religion to say there's no such thing as evil, only corrupted good, like I can get that. I can forgive that.
Yeah. Right. But I did want to make the point that he's not bringing up religion necessarily.
He's not like proselytizing and just bringing it up for no reason, for sure.
Yeah.
My favorite comment in regards to God's stance on, orcs being corrupted and becoming the henchmen of Morgoth. This is no worse than the toleration of the calculated dehumanizing of men by tyrants that goes on today. And that is pretty savage. So,
I mean, Tolkien was pretty savage.
Yeah.
That quote is still from letter 153, by the way.
Yes. And then the other thing that I was quoting was his essay entitled Orcs, included in Morgoth's Ring. I have not actually read this. I am reading off of Reddit, so thanks, Reddit. But I'm trusting that this is a real quote.
Morgoth's Ring, before you get into the quote, Morgoth's Ring is the 10th volume of the 12-volume series, The History of Middle-earth, compiled by Christopher Tolkien, R.I.P. Christopher Tolkien, where he, according to Wikipedia, analyzes the unpublished manuscripts of his father.
Excellent. And that's where I got the quote about how orcs would never surrender to elves, because for one thing Morgoth had achieved was to convince the orcs beyond refutation that the elves were crueler than themselves, taking captives only for, quote, amusement, end quote, or to eat them.
I do wish, it's great that Tolkien has all of this supplementary material about the interior orc life, but I do wish that we saw more of that in the books.
Oh, yeah. No. This was all me supporting my argument that he wishes we saw more of it in the books. I am not excusing these books. I'm arguing that the author, I still cannot find that quote for the life of me, but I think I've found enough supporting evidence that it probably exists somewhere. I don't think I made it up. I might have. I don't think I did.
There's probably something at least similar, if not the exact quote you're thinking of.
But he's right. He only implied that they are real people. And of course, readers aren't always going to get that. And so, of course, they get turned into monsters. if he didn't want them to be turned into monsters by popular culture, he should have done a better job humanizing them.
Yeah.
He didn't make them monsters, but he gave people enough ammunition to do it.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely correct.
Yeah. Anyway, orcs. I will say one of my favorite parts of Middle-earth fandom is the creation of it might be considered an AU, where a tribe of orcs broke away from Sauron, and it's just like the political struggles of orcs trying to be on even footings with the other races, and what if they weren't all monsters? It's great. It's good.
Is that like a collective AU that everyone has bought into, a la Omegaverse, or is it like one author who has written work about that concept?
I would say collective AU. I mean, usually when it comes up, it's the focus of the story. You don't get a lot of stories where a fan fiction author is like telling a completely different thing. And also, orcs are chill now.
Yeah.
For as much as culture at large has picked up on orcs as monsters, I'm very happy that there is a contingent of fans who are like, no, these are just people who had a really bad start.
Well, I mean, I think that that's one of the things that fandom and fan fiction does well, is bringing more nuance to characters that don't get the nuance they deserve in the text.
Absolutely.
Or work, I guess, because it's not always a text, but
yeah. I don't know how to lead you into the Entwives thing, because all I remember is thinking that the Ents deserved it.
I mean, yeah, the Ents were kind of shit husbands, it sounds like.
They got divorced, and then they were like, wait, what?
The Ents are kind of shit husbands. Before we talk about the Ents, though, given that we were just on the subject of fanfiction, I do think I should take 1 minute to plug our Lord of the Rings fanfiction episode with C.L. Pierlot, which you can go and listen to.
We talk a lot about orcs and dwarves.
Do we? I don't think we talk about orcs at all, actually, but we do talk a lot about dwarves.
Do I not? Oh,
it's been like a year. I mean, I don't actually remember it, but
there's some very good angsty porn with orcs in it.
Yeah, I don't think we touched on that at all. So we'll have to do a Lord of the Rings fanfiction episode 2, but that's not the point. Go and listen to that episode if you want to hear us talk more about fanfiction and Lord of the Rings. And now back onto the Ents. Yes, they're kind of shit husbands, but it's also just really sad that like they miss the Entwives and they want to have reconciliation with them, and they're just gone completely. I don't know. The way that they talk about it is sad.
I guess. I did not feel that way.
You didn't reread this book for this episode, so you're wrong.
No, but I remember talking about it when we were listening to it. We were in Arizona at the time, because I listened to this as audiobook on a road trip, which is the only way I can do audiobooks. Otherwise, I'm not actually able to pay attention. But I remember we actually had to stop the audiobook and talk about the Ents. Was how impassioned I was at the time.
I don't know. I don't think that there's anything wrong necessarily with having different values in your relationship, which clearly the Ents and the Entwives do, right? The Ents want to go wander and the Entwives want to settle down. And so I don't think that it's a bad thing that they separated. I think it's a sad thing that they can't find each other again.
Well, why would we think the Entwives want that?
We don't know otherwise.
We know that they left and never came back, presumably because they don't want to.
I'm not saying they have to go back, but like when they left, they didn't discourage the Ents from coming and visiting them.
All right, fair enough. I don't know. This kind of feels like a you reap what you sow situation.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. It was sad when Treebeard told it. Maybe if we heard it from an Entwife's point of view, it would be less sad. I would read that fan fiction.
Yeah. Remind me if I'm wrong, but the wives told the Ents they were unhappy, didn't they?
They did, and that's why they left. And the Ents don't disagree with that.
Okay.
Like, they're not saying Entwives should have been happy. They're just saying we miss them. Like, we would like to go back and see them from time to time and then go off and do our own things and then come back to them.
Well, I was definitely more on the Entwives side. But
I think if that's the expectation that you have going into the relationship, right? That you're going to see each other sometimes and you're going to separate sometimes, and that's okay. And it's sad when part of that can't happen.
In that way, you're right. All breakups are sad. But I think some breakups are better for everyone involved. And I don't know. It sounds like the Ents and the Entwives wanted different relationships. And the Ents wanted someone to come home to, and the Entwives wanted someone to hang out with. And you can't really have both. They seemed like incompatible needs, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think the relationship would have lasted. I mean, I don't think that you could have a relationship between the two of them in the way that we as people define a lasting relationship, right? But I don't get the sense that the Entwives never wanted to see the Ents again.
Well, I don't remember the exact passage, so it's hard to talk about. I could say what I remember it being, but I don't think that would be very interesting for anyone, especially if I'm wrong. So we came down on different sides of this relationship argument.
Surprise, surprise. Anyway, it was just a little sad. The other thing that's sad is Frodo's viewpoint.
Frodo is such a sad boy.
He is so fatalistic. He's like, there's no point in thinking about food because I'm not going to eat again. I'm never going to come home. I'm just going to die. And like, on the one hand, I think that's a very realistic point of view for him to take. But on the other, it's really sad.
That, I agree, is very sad. I feel very bad for Frodo. And I feel like also part of his outlook is due to the power of the ring, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's definitely being influenced, for sure.
So, like, part of it is he's maybe being a little too realistic. Part of it is the ring is fucking with his head. And he's pushing through at that and doing what needs to get done anyway, right? Because, like, he doesn't go, well, I'm probably going to die, so I might as well let the ring fall into the hands of the Dark Lord, and then everyone will die, and who cares? He still is fighting, and there's something beautiful in that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Going back to the Ents, I feel more sorry for the Ents because they can't change things than I do for Frodo, because he is actively I feel bad that Frodo is suffering, but it's also a very beautiful thing, as you say, because he is working so hard despite his feelings. And so it's less...
It's more bittersweet.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say you felt less bad for Frodo, and I was going to say, what?
No,
it leaves me feeling less sad reading it. I get that. Okay.
Yes. That is what I'm trying to say. Like, there's something also very hopeful about reading Frodo's viewpoints, because even though he's a sad, sad boy, he is, doing his best and struggling along. And so you can cheer for him. Whereas the Ents and the Entwives, you don't get that.
Yeah, absolutely. So one group of people that I absolutely did not appreciate as a youth was Rohan, the Rohirrim. Oh my goodness. I have absolutely grown to love them over the years, and they're probably my favorite Middle-earth faction now.
Yeah.
There's something so wonderful about being the normies.
I don't know. I mean, they're fine. I like them, but I do not have the depth of feeling towards them that it seems like you might.
I'm gonna say this, and this is a me thing. It makes me like them less that there's such a direct reference to Middle English civilization or whatever. That just makes it kind of a lame reference. But in the context of Middle Earth, they're the only group of people who aren't magic.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean,
and that kind of makes them the underdogs.
I think most of the people of Gondor are not magic. Like, the normal people of Gondor are not. They're not Númenóreans.
Sure, but we don't see any of them.
We don't, it's true.
Especially not in this book. Next book, we see a couple, and they're very fun, but that's not the point. They don't exist yet.
Boromir and Faramir are less Númenórean.
Yeah, but they're still.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. And then just looking at the civilization as a whole, there's the elves, and then there's the Gondorians, and there's the dwarves and the halflings, and they're all tragic and epic. And the Rohirrim are just like, we want to survive. We got horses over here.
Oh, I would say that the Rohirrim are every bit as tragic and epic.
It's on a different scale. The characters have beautiful storylines. That's not what I'm trying to argue. The civilization is very much like, hey, we'll help, but can you just give us some fields, and we're just going to live here and not bother anyone and help when we have to?
You think that the Rohirrim are less epic than the hobbits in the Shire?
The hobbits are supernatural, which makes it different. It makes them special. The Rohirrim are regular Joes. They have horse magic, so...
So are the hobbits. The hobbits are just really short people.
Okay, you're right. the main character hobbits have fairy blood, so that makes it different.
I mean, for sure, Frodo and Merry and Pippin, and well, Sam is a regular everyday gardener, but
Sam is a regular everyday. But so if my argument is the civilization as a whole, then you're right.
yeah, most of the hobbits are not like Frodo and Merry and Sam.
But the regular hobbits that we see kind of suck. Kind of suck a lot.
I would argue that the regular hobbits that we see in these first two books have been, on the whole, pretty great. Farmer Maggot turns out to be a really nice dude. Fatty Bolger is
he's a relative. No, he's a relative. He gets the fairy blood elevation. But Tolkien makes a point of saying that hobbits are small-minded and exclusionary.
Yeah, okay, that's true.
That's in the text. I'm not making that up.
You're not. It's true.
Okay, but when we see Theoden at a table with like Gandalf, a demigod, Aragorn, the son of Numenor, Legolas, a fucking elf, and Gimli, like a descendant of one of the dwarven like king bloodlines.
I mean, he's dwarven royalty.
He is, right? Yeah. I stumbled between going like, he was a son of one of Thorin's companions, but that doesn't go back far enough. And they were exciting for longer than that. That's just the story I know. Anyway, and then you got Theoden, who's like, I'm a guy. I'm a dude. I'm trying my best.
Actually, is Gimli dwarven? I think he's just the son of a companion.
They were the Firebeards, I think, not the Thorin's family, which was
Durin.
from Durin. Yeah, I don't think. No, wasn't Gimli his cousin?
Okay, so Gimli is not directly related to. It's not a straight line down from Durin,
but he's of the line.
Gimli, son of Gloin, son of Groin, son of Farin, son of Borin, who was son of Nain, who was direct to Durin.
Well, it's all sons.
Well, I'm assuming these are all men on here.
Well, I guess
because
that's a direct line. If each one was a child of the next.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah.
Yeah, so he is related to Durin.
So we've got a lot of bloodlines that can be traced across thousands of years. Which we know Tolkien cares about for some reason.
I think Tolkien was just really interested in genealogy because he was a medievalist.
That still follows with bloodlines that he cares about for some reason.
Yes, it does.
And then you got Theoden and his family. They're trying to do their best. They're not even a direct descendant of the Rohan founder.
Is he not?
No. So there's a whole thing about the burial mounds are on two sides of a road. And then there's the original bloodline down one side. And then at one point it went to like a nephew or something instead. And then they're buried on the other side. And Theoden's a descendant of that line. And I always wondered, are they going to go back to the first side? Because now Éomer, when he dies, are they going to bury him back on the first side? But he's not a direct descendant. Are they going to have to make another road to bury him on a different side of like a third side? These are the logistics I'm concerned about.
So, I mean, Theoden is related to the founder of...
Yeah, he's related, but at one point it was a nephew, not a son.
Okay, I admit that I don't understand what this family tree means by some of its lines and line breaks. But I see Theoden, it looks like Theoden's a pretty direct line.
He's a blood relation. He's not a direct descendant. But that's probably because women don't count.
Quite possibly.
There's a whole thing about which side of the hill you get to be buried on, and he doesn't get to be buried on the original side.
Either way, I mean, I view pretty much all of the societies in the world of Middle-earth as being similarly epic, although it's true that Rohan has less magic in it.
Maybe it's the fact that they see hobbits and go, we thought you were a fairy tale, that makes them very charming.
I would believe that.
It's like, there's something very, like, the fact that someone in Middle-earth is like, we thought you were made up, is hilarious.
Well, I mean, all the rest of Middle-earth just straight out doesn't realize that hobbits exist, which is kind of the same thing.
No, it's totally different. Finding out that a new thing exists in a world of magic is like, okay, yeah, you can't know everything. But going, I heard the stories and I thought you were made up is totally different.
I don't know. I think that's similar enough to me that But it is charming, their reaction to hobbits is true.
I see them as the Middle-earth everymen, and that used to be boring, but now I'm an adult and now it's charming and I like them a lot.
That's fair.
Also, I mean, everyone loves Eowyn. Come on. She's done a little dirty by the movies because her crush on Aragorn is not quite so pathetic in the books.
It's pretty blatant, though.
Yeah, it's blatant. It's not pathetic. As pathetic.
We don't see a lot of... I don't think we see enough of Eowyn to make it pathetic or not in the Two Towers.
But that means the times we do see her, she's triumphant. The percentage of time we see her is more triumphant.
I wouldn't call her triumphant in the books. I would call her background.
Heroic?
No, I don't think she manages to get that far. I mean,
well, in this book, no, you're right.
In this book specifically, we're not talking about any of the other books. Well, we can talk about the Fellowship because that exists, but Return of the King doesn't exist yet.
All right, she's a side character, and actually, you're right. In this book, she's pretty tragic because she's stuck dealing with Theoden, who's all possessed and stuff.
I mean, she does stay at Meduseld to keep everyone, intact while Theoden rides off with the warriors to Helm's Deep. So she gets to be in charge of things a little bit, but we don't see any of it.
Yeah, that sucks, huh?
Yeah, I mean, she's very background, and Tolkien writes some great female characters when you see them, but you don't see them an awful lot.
That's true. So you're right. She does not get to be in this list yet. But Theoden is someone who I did not appreciate as at all. And he might be one of my favorite characters now.
Yeah.
Just like thinking about the decisions he has to make, that's rough. I think he honestly does his best with the information that he has once he's no longer possessed, of course. But then thinking about...
Well, he's not really possessed.
No, okay, but...
He's under Saruman's spell, under Wormtongue's spell.
Okay, I shorthanded that to possessed. He was not in control of his faculties.
It's not possessed in the way that it looks like in the movies. That looks much closer to when you think possession, like this typical image of possession.
He is being magically influenced. He does not have free will.
Yeah.
And having to recover from that and then immediately lead your people through a crisis, the guy goes through some shit and does admirably, if not perfectly.
Yeah.
But I'm not trying to say he did do it perfectly. He does admirably, although not perfectly. How's that? That's a more clear way of saying it.
I mean, I understood what you meant the first time, but yes, I think that was clearer.
Yeah, the if not turn of phrase I've always found very ambiguous.
It can sometimes be ambiguous.
It can go either way, and I wanted to clarify which one I meant. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I like Theoden well enough. I certainly don't vibe with Rohan the way that you're vibing with Rohan.
Yeah.
Like they're fine.
I think part of it is just how absolutely dismissive I was of them before. The first couple of times I read this book, I felt like Rohan was a waste of time.
Yeah, see, I don't think I ever had that experience. So
I have grown past that.
Well, good. They don't deserve to be dismissed that completely.
No. And so maybe they get most improved. That's their award.
I don't think they get most improved. I think your viewpoint of them gets most improved.
Yeah, and that's why I see them as so great now, because they are most improved.
Yeah, but that's on you, not on them. So I have 2 words are weird that I would like to submit for consideration. Both book related for a change.
You may begin.
The first words are weird is Tolkien's use of the word gur, which I believe that I tweeted about once. He used it in a letter. I looked it up. It's letter 53. But he uses it a couple of times in this book. Sam uses it once, and then an orc uses it once. And it always takes me back because it feels very modern and very much younger than I associate Tolkien being.
Well, I feel like we've used that as words are weird before, but I don't want to set a precedence that we cannot repeat words are weird, and so I am forced to accept it.
it's possible that we used it when I came across it in his letters. But it's relevant again because he uses it in The Two Towers twice.
I'll allow it. I think part of what makes it feel so young is that onomatopoeias always feel a little young to me. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it.
Yeah, I think the other thing I associate it with is like, I don't know, my mother saying "grr" in text messages, which it's very jarring to see that in The Two Towers.
He's just like us.
The orcs are just like us.
No, Tolkien for using grr.
Well, the orcs use grr.
Well, I believe that the orcs growl.
No, one of the orcs specifically says grr.
That's all right. That's adorable.
Let me find the quote. Because, yeah, a Sam says it once, and then an orc says it once.
Now, is Sam quoting or making fun of an orc at the time?
No, it was unrelated to orcs. So it's on page 392 of my copy, which doesn't mean anything to anyone else. And it is at the very end of the book when Frodo has already been stabbed by Shelob. Sam has the ring. He's invisible. He thinks that Frodo is dead. And he's listening to these two orcs who have come, and he's trying to figure out what to do next. No, I don't know, said Gorbag's voice. The messages go through quicker than anything could fly as a rule, but I don't inquire how it's done. Safest not to. Grr, those Nazgul give me the creeps.
That is very funny.
Yeah, right?
There is no getting around that.
There's no getting around it. No.
Yeah. All right. That's your first submission, yes. But what about second submission?
So my second submission is in what is called Book 4 in this. And Chapter 4 of Book 4 is titled Of Herbs and Stewed Rabbit, which I just found very jarring because I associate that format of title with very modern kind of tropes. And so it was funny to see it in a non-tropish context.
Yeah, I mean, so part of me wonders if that's just another example of Tolkien influencing our language. But more importantly, I think nowadays when you see it, it's always such over-the-top dramatic shit.
Yeah, that too.
Like, of ice and fire. It's always these, like, I'm gonna use the word highfalutin. It's always highfalutin concepts. It's never something, well, I guess ice is concrete, but that's not referring to ice as a concrete thing in that title, right?
Yeah, it's always some kind of like metaphorical concept.
I did mean metaphorical when I said highfalutin. You're right.
You're welcome. But yeah, I think you're right that it's usually some metaphorical thing and not something very concrete like this. And yeah, I saw that and I was like, was this the origin of that trope? Does that stem from Tolkien too? And I don't know if I would go that far because I haven't done any kind of research whatsoever. But I saw that title and I was like, oh, hey, this is not what I expected to see. I would also like to point out that it's the only chapter title that I remember reading because I don't usually read chapter titles.
Clearly you do, you just don't remember them.
That's
because if you don't read them at all, you wouldn't have noticed this one.
That's possible that I read them and they just don't stick in my brain. But this one did.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Fiction Fans.
Come disagree with us. We're on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky at FictionFansPod. You can also email us at fictionfanspod@gmail.com.
If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and follow us wherever your podcasts live.
We also have a Patreon where you can support us and find our show notes and a lot of other nonsense.
Thanks again for listening, and may your villains always be defeated. Bye.
Bye.